Good morning, people of the world. It's your boy, Living Proof. Happy Friday out there. I want to come on here to give a quick message of the day with the Bible verse of the day. And the Bible verse of the day comes from John chapter 5, verse 6. And it states that, and Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he was in that condition for a long time. And he asked the man, do you want to be healed? So I want to, get more into that Bible verse and also, tell you a bit, recap of that story. So in Jerusalem, they will have this pool that was located in Bethsaida, and that pool was for all the crippled, the people that was, had, leper diseases or, paralyzed, and they would go, into that pool to be cleansed. Um, but one day as Jesus was walking, he saw this man, near the gate, and he asked him, "Do you want to be healed?" The first thing that the man, responded to Jesus was like, he have nobody to help him, to get into the pool or lead him to the pool, when the water is hot. Probably by the time he get there, the water is all cold. So from that point, he think that the water is, he can't be cleansed because the water is cold. So Jesus told him, uh, take up your mat and walk. And when the man realized that he has been healed, he got up and he began to, walk. Then, a little bit after that, the Pharisees noticed the guy that was walking, and he was like, "Yo, who healed you?" And he said he don't know the person that healed him, but the person told him to, take up his mat and walk. And the Pharisee was trying to condemn him because it was a Sabbath, and they said that, oh, you can't take up your mat on the Sabbath. So, whoever did this to you, they in complete error of the Sabbath law, but later on down, the man realized it was Jesus that healed him. And when Jesus met him again, Jesus told him to, stop sinning or something worse may happen to you. So, that story right there, I want to break down and give y'all, a meaning behind that story because, you might look at it from a physical point of view, when it was clearly a spiritual message behind that story. Um, the spiritual message was, the guy was spiritual lame, and you know, and there's, three, I wanted to, break up, talk about three main keys that, came to my mind with that story. But first, I want to give a definition of what is what is lame. What's the definition of lame? And the definition of lame is unable to walk, resulting from a physical issue or condition. Um, but there also is a slang term for lame, and that slang term that this world use nowadays is that's something that's not interested, something that's not cool, or something that is whack. They say that is lame, nowadays. So I want to give y'all two different, definition, the slang definition and the original definition of the word lame. So, two things that I want to break down in that story is to talk about the meaning behind those. The first condition, you know, was that the first thing the guy said when Jesus met him, his first response was that, he, didn't have nobody to help him to be healed. And, from that statement, I'm thinking about, the man didn't want to, take accountability. There was accountability for, the reason why he's in this predicament. He was, saying that somebody, he couldn't help him to be healed, but he didn't take accountability for why he was in that state of, you know, spiritual lame or being crippled, because Jesus told him, to stop sinning or something worse may happen to you. So that point, God stated that, sin that caused him to be lame, but Jesus told him to stop sinning. So that's the first thing that I, come to mind, that he didn't take accountability. The second thing that came to mind is that, having a, encounter with God, can change you. Having that encounter, when God met him and told him, take up your mat and walk, you know, something gave him the courage to stand, out of, all the time that he was lying there. He ended up, he felt the power of God from Jesus, spoken word, like take up your mat and walk. God spoke life into, his body, and he was, had that little faith to get up, and he, got up and walked. That's the second thing I want to point out. The third thing I want to point out is, you know, to stop sinning, to turn away from whatever that causes us, that put us in that condition in the first place. That was Jesus told him to, stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you. Because if we don't stop sinning, spiritually, then something worse can happen to you. It remind me of a part of what Jesus told about the, you know, about how demons or evil spirit operate. When Jesus comes to cleanse, clean that person's temple, you know, cast out evil spirits, then the body is cleansed. But then the spirit that is gone, he's like, he's go wandering through dry places, seeking for a new home. And then he's like, I'm gonna return back to my old home, the place where I was at. And then he said he'll bring, seven more spirits that's wicked, you know, than the first evil spirit. And then Jesus said that then the condition of that person is worse than before, because, now extra spirit taking over that person's body. So that's the main reason why Jesus told him, to stop sinning, to turn away from that sin, or something worse may happen to you. So so overall, that story is about, a spiritual condition. For Jesus came to set the captives free, to, heal the lame, to open the eyes of the blind, to restore our, spiritual state. Because if we looking at it from a fleshly point of view, we might think that, oh, this guy is crippled, he's blind, from a fleshly point of view. But Jesus was looking at, his spiritual state, because, we are spiritual beings also with fleshly beings. So what causes us in a physical state can, happen spiritually first to us. So Jesus told him to stop sinning. So that's another thing that I want to point out, is how Jesus says stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you. It doesn't matter, the condition of, you know, where we are at, spiritually, but once that encounter with Jesus, once that encounter with God, we can be healed from whatever, condition, you know. So, I want to really get, open, more of a, talk about more spiritual standpoint, because Jesus said, the word that he speaks is of spirit and of life. So, all the parables in the Bible is more about, a spiritual state, and not like a physical point of view, So, I really want to point out that, we really have to make a change spiritually. We can't, you know, keep doing the same thing, after our encounter with Jesus. We have to change. We have to allow Jesus to be, our Lord and Savior, because he came, as a man, form of a flesh, to be tempted and try, go through all the same temptation we go through on earth, but, he said not, he became, the Redeemer of mankind. And, it's God's salvation, God's grace, is for all people, if we choose to accept it. God gave us a free will, so we have to choose to accept, God's gift. But we can't blame God if we don't accept it. That's another point. It might be lame, to follow God. It might be what they say, not cool, things of that nature, to be a Christian, or, have a relationship with God, because, having a relationship with God, it goes against, what we was taught in this world, how to operate, how to live. We was taught, from a fleshly point of view, because, we was born into this world, we born, truth be told, we are born, lame spiritually. We are born, crippled spiritually. We are born blind spiritually. But that encounter with God will open our eyes. It will heal us. It will, restore our bones spiritually state. Because we are three parts. We are, soul. We are spirit, and we are, flesh. Three parts, three in one, that make up the human, mankind. But, that's a quick, Bible study, word that I want to give out today, because it's about, restoring our, you know, spiritual condition. How Jesus wants, wants to restore our spiritual condition. So we have to, open up our, heart to Jesus Christ, because he stands at the door of our heart, and he's waiting to come in. He's waiting to cleanse, our, our heart, he's ready to, do a lot of wonderful things in our life, but we just have to first, accept, and believe, in Jesus Christ. So it's your boy Living Proof. Happy Friday. About to get, day going. We out.